Hello and welcome to Top of the World. Today's project, changing the mat, belt, track, drive thing. This is a 2005 LYNX Yeti Rotax powered Snowmobile. Track broke allegedly at 90 kilometers an hour while travelling down a river. It's a bit old, it's 2005. Anyway, as far as I know, that was the original belt, snapped in half completely. We've got a used belt to put on it, and we've got no service manual. It's going to be an interesting one. As far as I know, most, if not all, snowmobiles, the main drive shaft, which I'll show you in a minute, that goes through into the gearbox, and we've got to dismantle best we can. Now this one's not in the best of conditions, so we're going to be finding other interesting things. I've got it on this trolley, and the reason it's up on this trolley is because I'm in my working shop, and if I have anything permanent and suddenly a job comes in, which I'm praying for, I can move this around and manoeuvre it. So I've jacked it up at the front. I've used my ditch crossing platforms from the Land Cruiser, screwed 2 bits of wood up either side. This not only gives me plenty of room underneath, it allows me to be able to remove the entire rear carriage, which you have to do. In order to get these belts on, you have to move the entire rear carriage, lay the belt out, put the carriage in, put the belt and the carriage back in together, and then finally put the drive shaft through. Also, it's got seized wheels on it. It needs some love. We're not doing a rebuild on this, right? I am literally replacing the track and anything that I find broken, bearings, loose. One of the problems that I found straight away, which is why the trolley was where it is when the hood lifts up, the wires that are supposed to hold it in place are snapped. So, it's only on one wire. It's not quite where it should be. I'd actually position this in such a way that, there we go, sits on the wall. Right, let me show you inside, show you what we've got. So this entire undercarriage all has to come off and out of it. At the front here, you'll see this main shaft. This has to also go through the new track, belt, mat. It has to go round it, so that has to come out. Well, I can tell you that at this end, it's bolted into a bearing housing, which is different from the Yamaha, and that end goes into the gearbox. So, yeah, you can see where it was dragged from wherever it was. In order to get to the bearing housing, it looks like we have to remove the exhaust and the exhaust housing. There you go, 2-cylinder Rotax engine. Much bigger than what I'm familiar with. In my day, I used to race Rotax engines, and they were a rebuild sometimes after every race. Okay, so that there is the gearbox. Now, one of the problems we've got on this, right, is on the Yamahas, all of this comes off. But on these, they're all pop riveted on. Right, now I could just go round and drill all the pop rivets and put new ones in. But it's obviously designed that the gearbox comes out this way. So we have to remove the gearbox and the brake disc. Right, probably don't want to look at that. So that we can release this side of that. We have to get that shaft out because that shaft goes inside the new. What I am quite impressed with is the sheer size of the cooling. So this whole aluminium thing is the cooling for the engine. That's big. I can see screws and things missing in there. That would normally indicate to me, oh no, that's supposed to be pop rivets. We can tell that because there's pop rivets in this side. They've just been ripped out, look. Yeah, there's quite a few of them missing at this end. Okay. And we got a lot of wear on the chassis, and it's also been at some point snapped in half and repaired, and the other side's the same. So it's old and well worked is what we're saying. So anyway, the aim of the game is to be able to get that out, because that also has to go through the inside of the new track mat carpet. So first thing to do is remove the steering and the gearbox choke. Anyway, right, and get the brake housing off, and then we can start dismantling the gearbox and get that out. I have removed the airbox. Yeah. Right. Okay. And this is the second-hand mat carpet track. Well, why is it second-hand, Simon? Because you've also put 2 second-hand ones on your Yamaha. I'll tell you why. Because a new mat track carpet is now, is it double? 2.5 to 3 times the cost it was 3 years ago. So you're looking at a significant cost of the used Snowmobile, if not equal or at least half the value to putting on a new track mat carpet. Why am I saying mat carpet? Because it's called different things in different places. It's the big black thing that makes it all work. Okay, right. Let's start by... I'm pretty sure I need to get to that bearing housing down in there somewhere. Down in behind here, there is the bearing housing for this side. It is a shame that all this doesn't come off, make it so much easier, as opposed to having to... I don't know if we can see from this side. Anyway, I think, and I've got no workshop manual for this, and I've never done a LYNX before, but if I was a guessing man, I need to remove the exhaust on this side, and then remove the gearbox and the brakes and everything on that side. This is all snapped, so this should go to the other side, but the wire that's holding it up is also about to snap, so we really need to... This is how these things are held up, with these wires and the spring. This should go to this side, and then what happens is these springs here, when this closes down, that pulls the cable down into the front there. But you can see that's supported on the wall there, because this one's going to snap and the other one has snapped. The other thing I noticed when I was putting it up is this has a significant amount of play in it. A significant amount of play. We haven't been told to do that, but I'm going to look at everything, and then if I find anything that I think needs to be done, quick conversation with the owner, and he can make a decision as to whether he wants to replace it. That is an aftermarket engine heater, which I find quite fascinating, because I don't have any engine heater on mine. If it's -30, then it's -30 and it will need to start. But this has got, oh dear, what on earth? Right, well, we don't think that's supposed to be like that. Okay. Oh yeah, it's all, you know, it's well used. That's what I'm saying. Right, let's start then dismantling. So what I want to do first is to get this carriage completely off of it. It's just quite simple. It's just got a couple of large brackets holding the back end on, and then a big bolt holding the front end on. However, that's quite interesting. I did see him the other day and asked him about that. He said he didn't know anything about it, why it stuck out like that. So that should be flush, pretty much like it is on the other side. Should look like that. So these are the bolts for the carriage, and then you've got this big bolt goes all the way through. Quite clearly, that's not going to come out of here. So I'm hoping it's in 2 halves and just screws in. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. We need to investigate what's going on there. I don't quite know what's happening there. That looks like what I've just seen up here, ain't it? Right, well, I've just found that on there. Quite clearly that comes from this. So I don't know why that wasn't mentioned, but I haven't taken that out of there and put it on here, which is where I just found that. And I can tell you for a fact, it didn't fall out of there, right, and land up here. Right, so there you go. Only half the information or no information. Okay. One of them jobs. Right, let's get to it then, start dismantling that lot. So I can already hear the comments in the comment section. Why am I working on snowmobiles in mid-June? Well, there was no snow, was there? And if there's no snow, we don't get paid for snow ploughing, and that's how we earn our money in the winter. And thus far this year, right, the jobs I have done haven't been paid for. So cash flow is zero, non-existent. In addition to that, I had a job lined up for earlier this year, that got cancelled. And there's a problem with the job I'm working on, and I'm not due to start the next big one, potentially for another 6 weeks, and I've got to put in a planning application, and my friend's kind enough to drop off all his broken stuff as winter entered, everything that he broke, so that I can do it as and when I get time. The weather's really bad, so that's why we're working on snowmobiles, and this is not the only one. We've got another one stacked behind this. So I'm hoping this don't take any more than today to do. I'm sure there is a number of hours booked to this job if you knew what you were doing and you had a service manual. I don't, and there isn't one. And I can't download one, just can't find one for this at all. Service manual, owner's manual, yeah. Service manual, no. But I can tell you the gearbox has got to come out. So we'll start with that, we'll take the carriage off, get the gearbox out, and then we'll be able to see how that thing's held in and remove it. And once we've got that removed, we can slide the new track in and put the carriage back. Right, let's do that. Right, so on this, we're going to remove the carriage. So what's interesting is once I've got this cover off, this is the bolt that holds the front carriage on. This big bar that runs through the front there, that is the bolt that holds it on. And it looks like it's just worked its way loose and been left. So I've removed the 2 bolts of this back bracket and left the front one in. That's what that bolt should look like. And then I've left the front one in again, but cracked it. I'm just about to remove this, but I'll show you why I've got this set up like this in order to remove the carriage. Firstly, it's the right working height for my back. So what should happen is when I remove this second bolt here, this should swing on the front nut and the front strut and sit on here, supporting the weight. There we go. Okay, now we can remove the front bolts from these brackets because the bracket is just swung. And then remove the 2 front, well, remove this one, the other one's already hanging out. And at that point we should be able to extract the whole lower carriage. So I can tell somebody's been in here before. because all these nuts should have nylock nuts on them, and this one does not, and it's got a washer. So I'm not the first person in here either. Okay, that's the rear carriage, the rear axle released. Let's remove, well, I could almost do that by hand. Remove this one and remove the other side. We should be able to extract that. Okay, well, I've just removed the other side, and I can tell you from the length of the bolt that this one ain't doing anything. No, that wasn't doing anything at all. That's what it should look like. And that's what it looks like. Lucky. And that's been out for a while. Okay, we should be able to extract this whole carriage now. Jesus, that's heavy. Okay, that's the track carriage out. So we had 3 bolts here, same on the other side, and then, well, it's supposed to be a bolt in there and one on the other side, and that's out. Now that's not the only thing we've got to do under here. There's also track guides. You can see the 2 bolts, the heads of the 2 bolts there, and then if we look underneath, we can see that. You can't leave that in and hope to bend the track around it. They've got to come out. So that's our next thing to come out. And then it leaves us this to get out. So we'll remove these 2 track guides. There's one on this side and then obviously another one on this side. So you can see the bearing housing for this, right? The bolts go through onto the inside under here, right? If we could take this off, we wouldn't need to take the exhaust pipe out. But in order to get that bearing housing out, we have to remove the exhaust pipe because the nuts are down the back there somewhere. So let's get that lot out and get these 2 track guides off. Right, that's loose. Now we can finish removing the brake caliper. Which is almost out. Okay. Hang that there. Okay, so after looking at this gearbox, I can't see any obvious way of the gearbox splitting. So I'm going to assume it's bolted to the housing here and the whole gearbox complete slides off the end of the shaft. Oh, oil. Oh. And it has, the whole gearbox has come off that shaft. Okay, This feels quite heavy. Do I even need to pull it out? I don't actually know if I need to remove that from the hole. Oh, oil. Obviously. Okay. Right, I need to show you this. So there was 4 bolts holding it to the chassis, and I've undone those because I can't see any way of splitting the gearbox, and literally pulled it off the spline to the drive shaft. Well, that has actually saved so much work compared, I know, disassembling the gearbox. If that is how it's supposed to come apart, but it must be. Right, let's clean the oil off these hands. Can I? That belt off of that. Christ. Well, there you go. Yeah, that's exactly how that's supposed to come off. Not a bad guess, I think. And I did guess. Right, so you've got an oil seal there, you've got a double oil seal. Right, let me show you what I've got. Oh, that was a good guess. Had to be, really. Common sense, that one. Right, so there's 4 bolts holding this gearbox on. There's 2 of them in the spacers. And the other 2, which go through here and here. The other 2 are still in there. I can't take them out because the brake disc won't come out. You see the double oil seal there and the spline. And then if we look down in there, that is the other end. That is the other end. Well, that is the end of the drive shaft. Okay, so we got this end off. Now what we've got to do is get the other end off, which, as I've said, I'm pretty sure involves removing the exhaust. So what we'll do is we can actually get that gearbox out of there. The oil don't look very good. Looks milky. Anyway, we can get that and clean that up now, ready to go back in. We don't need to disassemble that, so that's the result. Drain the oil out, clean that up, get ready to go back in. So now if we look under here, that's this end of the shaft is out. Now we've got to take this end off. Let's get the exhaust pipe out of there. It is now lunchtime, so we're 3 hours 20 minutes into this, and in 3 hours 20 minutes we've got the carriage off. We've now got the gearbox out. I think another 30 minutes or so we should have the exhaust off, and then that out. That would be about right, about an 8 hour, 9 hour, call it an 8 hour job, something like that. Depends on the fight it gives us going back in, doesn't it? And how much cleaning up we got to do. Yeah, that needs cleaning, right? Okay. Springs. My God, I don't know how we're going to get them all back on. Anyway, the exhaust pipe out. Now we've got to take this off. And then we should be able to get the drive shaft out. It's just loose at that end. So, let's take that off, and then we should be able to get it out. That's the cover off. So we should be able to pull that from the other end, or from underneath, and extract it. Well, not really understanding why we've still got a lot of length on that. It's got to come out this way. See that? Don't want to quite clear that, but it's got to come out that way. which we've removed, we should, in theory, this is so tight. Wow. Okay, so that'd be worth us knowing this has got a secondary plate on there. Okay, let's get that out. Right, we now need to turn our attention to this because we have a few seized wheels, so it looks like they're breaking free. We need to clean this up, make sure everything's good on this carriage. I'm sure it's just where these have been sat. Yeah, just got to free them up, put some oil in them. And then whilst it's down, we'll take this opportunity to grease it up and get it ready to go back in. I don't think it's ever seen any grease. Pretty sure it's never seen any grease. Right. Let's get this cleaned up, get everything freed, get it greased up, and then we're going to make some top brackets for this whilst it's off where this is cracked. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to put another plate on top of this. So I've got some steel plate there. Mark it up like that, cut that one off, turn it over, mirror that for that side, and then we make two more for that side. There. Something like that. So I've basically replicated what's on the bottom. I can't go as far along because of the bolt, but if it's worked on the bottom, it's going to work on the top. So that's that side. Now I'm going to spin it round and do the worst side. The crack on the other side is really bad. Yeah. Well, let's do that side. Wow, the Arctic summer, it's just loving it, right? It's just wet and windy and cold. Anyway, thankfully, I don't think you can even see the rain, can you? Anyway, thankfully, once we've done that one, we've then got this one to go on to. So, let's get this one done first, because we're not going to get it done in a day. So I nearly mentioned on the other side about welding it and why it's not being welded. Well, for anybody that knows anything about anything, you can see that's been welded. And it hasn't worked. So we're not going to attempt to weld it. I have just drilled through the first hole though. So what I've done is I've marked up and drilled the first hole. Right, that's the chassis repaired. Now what we've got here, is we've got some new runners. He said he bought these a long time ago, and they go underneath. So we're going to replace those. So we need to remove this bolt here, and it should slide all the way off, apparently. In a generic length, and then it's down for us to cut them down. Must be where we are on that. Make sure you put it back in the right way, they've got a hole. Meets up with that. Right, that's new runners and the repairs done. Now what we're going to do is we'll grease it all up while it's here, and then we can open up the mat and slot the carriage into the mat and start getting it back under the snowmobile. Right, we're going to have arrows on this somewhere. Arrows. Right. Yeah. All right. That's how that goes. Like that. And then we've got to lay it over and get it up underneath the machine there. Remembering to put this in before it gets too far, and then comes the worst bit of all, and that is trying to wangle that shaft back through here and into the machine whilst in all this heavy rubber. Right, and I like a bit of heavy rubber, but this is kind of heavier than I like. Be alright if you were the Michelin man, I would guess. Okay. It'd be nice if we'd had a second trolley here with a pump up thing we could have. Anyway, we don't. So it don't matter what is nice and what isn't nice. We ain't got it. However, I need to move that gearbox because I can see me fighting this, and that's just balance there. So shall I show you the oil in the gearbox? Yeah, that's kind of interesting, right? Nasty. And what's interesting is also, when I filled this up with grease, it pushed all the water out that was inside. So that needed doing. And we've got to clean the gearbox up yet, but my next job is to get that shaft back in and get this back under this machine. Right, because we're not going to get it finished in one day, because we've got to do a reassembly, and it's now 3:35. So, and that's because we've done all these repairs on that. I'm pretty sure booked time on this is 8 hours or under, but I ain't gonna do 8 hours because we've spent 3 hours, 2.5 hours doing this. Right, let's get that under there then. Okay, so what I normally do, because I can't lift it, is I normally have a cup of coffee and think about this, but I can't have coffee. I can't drink anything hot. I can't drink anything cold. I can't eat anything hot. I can't eat anything cold. And I can't go outside and breathe heavily through my mouth because the dentist. Right? That's one term. Right? That'd be another term. Unprofessional fucking idiot would be the right term. As he ground one of my teeth down so far now, all the nerves are exposed. Oh yeah. Yeah, I've got more problems now. I've been to the dentist and he's not finished, he's just part way into work, than I had when I went there because I pulled out my own teeth to stop the infection. Right? I fucking hate dentists. I know all of them, not all of them. Right, I had a really one good Harley Street dentist. Anyway, right. So my idea now then, because I can't lift it, and since it's a track and it's got wheels, right, since it's a track and got wheels, I was wondering whether I could walk it up under the machine. That's what I was wondering, since I can't lift it. Well, we were going quite well until we got to there. Right, and then I'm not quite sure how to do that. Oh. my back. Nothing wrong with my brain, it's just my back. Wants to come this way a bit, really. Thing is, if I take my foot out now, that's going to go right back to where it was. I think. Stop. And then I'm going to have to do it all again. Oh, just hold on there. I've got to make sure it all goes up underneath where it needs to go. Now I know some of you have seen the accident waiting to happen. They see that I've laid this board on the back here and it's leaning up against a trolley that I'm pushing this way, which is on wheels. However, have I moved that gearbox? No. One of the things that I enjoy about being a little bit older, as opposed to a little bit younger, is most of the time you've seen the accident before it's happened. And I've screwed this ramp to the trolley. However, I haven't moved that gearbox. And now I know what's going to happen is if I don't move the gearbox, it's going to fall over, flip up the oil pan, and all that dirty oil is just going to make a real big mess somewhere. So, I can't remember where I put the drain plug. No, I should have put it over there. Oh, and I did. Right. Let's just prevent that accident as well. Okay. Now, go the long way around, Simon. So as it's going up underneath there, I have to get it absolutely spot on because otherwise the frame won't go up under the chassis. Which it has now done. So at this point we should be able to lift it up. Continue to walk it in. Mate. What's it caught on? right there. Is that? Oh yes. Yes. Okay. So this is the bolt going in nicely for that centre bar. Easy. We get the other side in. That'll make sure the undercarriage is running true. This is this rusty. We really need to put some grease on that. This is the one that was sticking out of this side. Come out. Okay. So, I think getting that track up underneath there, I actually think that's the easy bit. I think the hard bit is going to be getting this back in, but we'll see. I've been wrong before. That's what it's supposed to look. Okay, so that's done up as tight as it needs to be, and so is the other side. And I've just used a ratchet strap to take the sag out of the belt, and I fully unadjusted these wheels, which means I've got more track than I will ever have, and that is going to aid us in pushing this lot up here. Oh, you can't see nothing. Hold on. Let's put all the lights on. That will aid us in pushing this up here. So this hole over there, that's where one end of the shaft's got to go into. We need plenty of play then, so we can spin it around and then get the other end in this half, right? And this belt's heavy, so where it's sagging down here, now I'm just going to block this up to give me plenty of play in the belt up there, so I haven't got to fight the belt so much. So a block of wood under there will push that up to there, and then I should have a big loop of belt track carpet up in the top there to be able to get that back in. I don't think I can get you any better than that when you're not probably going to be able to see what it is I'm doing anyway. Okay, so we've got to wangle this back into it past this suspension dropout strap, getting that end up into that hole. Something like that, and then we've got to push that in such a way that we can get this end in. So I've nearly got it there, but when you put it back in, you've got to make sure that set of wheels is sitting in that track, and at the moment you can see it's sitting on top of it. So the centre of this wheel here needs to be in here, and it's not. So I've just got to lever the track or the drive shaft over to get it to sit. So at the moment it's sitting on top of it. So the track needs to come that way, or this needs to come this way and sit into there. So I'm just going to have to push and pull that about until it slots in, and then I should be able to put the shaft in. It's just not sitting quite right on the track. So once I had knocked that track into line, you can see how it's going to be now. That went in easily. So it's in, and the speed cap is on the top. And it's bolted up, but it's not tight. So then we can see we've obviously got the track, the surplus still taken out. We can see this end here, and it's all loose, and we've got plenty of play in it. That's really good for reinstalling the gearbox. So before we tighten up the other side over there, next thing to do is clean up the gearbox. So that didn't look very good at all, did it? Yeah, that's not good in there. Right, let's clean that up. Make sure the oil seal is good. Now I didn't catch that on the way out, and it looks good. And then reinsert the gearbox, put the belt line back on, reinstall the exhaust. We're probably about 3 hours away from completion. Current time is 16:30. That's it. That's as far as we're going on this. Can I start back on this tomorrow morning? I can do if I start early, but tell you a lot of Simon, I have to go and do a plumbing job, which I've been promising the man to do for weeks now. And I was going to do that this morning, but then he had to do something. So tomorrow morning, while the weather's bad, we've got a nasty cellar to go into, as they all are. I'm not picking each cellar out as any particular nut. In fact, it's better than some we've been in, right? A lot better than some. Anyway, it's iron plumbing. So it's an old system, and it's connected with iron and copper. And yeah, I think he boiled it over, and the iron's leaking. So we just got to... There's no replacements. Just take it all apart, put it back together, reseal it all up. Stop the leaks. Right. Yeah, I'd call that a success. So that's all gone quite easy. Really, we would have finished it in another hour, I reckon, if we had not made all the necessary new repairs or extra repairs to the chassis and everything else, all the other little jobs we got to do. You wouldn't normally, when you're doing a job like this, clean the gearbox out and clean it all up, but you know, you've got to stick within your time. Yeah, that is nasty. Right, so we're back on this hopefully tomorrow afternoon and finish it. I also want to clean all that out. Right, so I am back from my morning plumbing job. Weather's improved a bit. Look what we got here. Look at that. So before I went out this morning, I cleaned that up. Lovely. Right, so if we roll it over, I'll show you what we've got to achieve now. We've got to lift that back in. You can see the splines in there. Maybe you can't see the splines in there anyway. The splines in there, that seal's nice. We've got to lift that into this hole. Have I got my light on even? No, Simon, there. Right, so I've cleaned all this up, and now we've got to get this gearbox onto that. So I'm going to put something in there from underneath to wedge that up into the middle there, and then we get the gearbox in. I've also cleaned up all the hardware, ready to put it all back together. So it's nothing worse than putting dirty nuts and bolts back into something. And then we can move over and put the track guides back into here. But first things first, let's get the gearbox in the gearbox housing. Golly. And where do they go? In the top there. Do they have nuts on the back of it then? I suppose they must do. But the biggest thing is get it on that spline without doing any damage to the rubber seal. That's the big thing. Right. Ow. Now we've got to kind of lift that on to that shaft. I need to be up above. Right. That's better by a lot. Okay. we've got to line up the shaft with the gear so that the gear box goes flush. We're almost there. But not quite. An element of pressure whilst it must be in there because it's turning the. Is that it? Right, that's the bottom bolts in. We have to find where that wants to sit and it's most comfortable. But before we do that, we want to get this belt not back on, but back behind there while we've got some extra room. Yes, like that. Okay, now we can set to and tighten that up. Now, put the exhaust together, back together. Right, it's held together with springs. These are really, really tough springs. And getting them off was a nightmare, getting them back on, right, you're just going to hurt yourself. There must be a tool to put these springs on. But remember what I said about age and thinking and a cup of coffee? Have I had a cup of coffee? Well, no, obviously, because I can't. However, I have made myself cheese wire, right, on a hook like this, and you'd think, well, you could just put it on there and just pull it, couldn't you? But how can you pull it when it's that hard with one hand and guide it with the other? Well, you can't. Ratchet straps are your best friend. So, we've got a ratchet strap here, and that is hooked to a very large piece of cast iron over there. And then what we're going to do, we've already got one spring on just to prove it works. There you go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put the other spring on the bottom here, and then we're going to do top ones. Right. And where do you think you've been? Right. Okay. So I'm going to attempt to show you how easy it is if you use your brain as opposed to all that tugging and pulling and levering. So what we're going to do is, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I am going to put you there for a moment. Right, and see if I can't get you in a little bit closer. So we take the spring, and we pop that on one end like that, and then we pop the second end on a hook. I will show you this in just a moment, like so. Put that underneath there, hook up the ratchet strap there. Right, do I want to put that underneath there? No, I need to make sure it goes in the right kind of direction. Right. So we've got a setup kind of like that, and as opposed to me tugging and pulling, right, I'll just do that. Steady, Eddie. Right, so that is now underneath that where it's got to go. All I have to do is pull it up, right, and release the ratchet strap. And then broken a sweat yet. We've got that to there, that to there, that to there. that all the way over there, and the spring is compressed. So I'll just sit you back up in here in your little rest place. Where's me long nose pliers? Turn my light back on so I can see what I'm doing. I need another turn on that. Push that up like so and release. Release, take that off of there, hang that onto there, get this bit of wire around here like so, get you back in there so you can see where I am. So that spring is hooked over there. I'm going to pull it this way a bit so that it seats where it's supposed to, like that. There you go. Right, and I haven't hurt myself yet. And I might be able to pull this out over the top this time. It was underneath last time. It might come out the top. Assuming you can see what I'm doing, yep. So take this side, because these pull tight on here. Take that off of there. Put it back out. Pop that in there. Like so. And you're going to see it work much better now on the top. So we hook that end of the spring like that, and that end of the spring like that. Can we pull this one enough? Yes, because we're on the top. There. That's that one on. Get the last spring for this particular. Don't go that way, Simon. Go that way. No, don't be disappearing down there. Come on, we've got work to do. Right, put that on there. Can I pull this one? Yes. There you go. Okay. So I was kind of wondering when I took this apart how I was going to put it back together and whether there was a tool or... Anyway, this is as good a tool as you're going to need. And that one. Okay. That's the exhaust back together. Okay, with the exhaust on now. So I've been into my nuts and bolts collection and I found a nylock nut for the one that was missing. I don't know if I'm going to need any extra lever or support, or whether I can just raise this enough to get a... Oh no, I've got to lift the carriage up, haven't I? Can't I use my ratchet strap? Ratchet straps, a man's best friend. Bit more, Solomon. Oh. Let's try that. swivel. In there, right? Just like that. Okay. Right, so I'll tighten up the 6 bolts now that hold the rear chassis in place, and then we should be able to let that down. I've put the front guides over the top. I'll show you those in a minute. And we've got the brake caliper back on. Okay, so we've got the 6 bolts in either side. So the chassis is all bolted up where it should be. The rear wheels are all in line where they should be. Let's have a look up the front. All nicely in line. This is obviously true. The gearbox is in as bolted up. The front part of the chassis is bolted in. The rear part of the chassis is bolted in. The guides, the upper guides, are both in. What that does is that takes the track across the top of this to make sure it doesn't make contact. We have to put on, reinstall the rear passenger foot blocks or steering blocks, depending on how you ride your snowmobile. We need to bolt those in. The exhaust is in and complete. Right, we're just about to deal with that. If we go round to the other side, we can see that everything is back in. The brake caliper is back in. The belt is back on. I need to go and find the right size connection for this now, for the gearbox. That's forward and reverse. And then we're ready to put some tension on the track to take the slack out of it. So when I undone this, there was obviously no track on it, but these had a locking nut on it, and I left the locking nut where it was to now enable me to put this back somewhere near where it was. Well, there's a very specific setup for tensioning belts. Right, we're almost there. Right, that's where it was. Right, this one on this side, this one, and this one, not only do they tension the belt, but they also hold the track true at the back. Sometimes you hear a snowmobile running and it sounds terrible, and that's out of tracking, and it means that the wheels are not running true next to all this, and you can kind of hear it. So you can't really test any of that without it running. But that is essentially the chassis and the track back together, everything this side back together. Yeah, I've got to put those on, and then we've got to finish off doing what we took apart in here, clean all this up, put the airbox back on and the housing for that. That's the only two bits I got left now out of everything I took apart, and then we'll turn our attention to this. Right, let's give it some oil. Kind of like that. We're going to give it yam lube, gear oil. Just don't start. I know giving yam lube to a Bombardier, right, which is what this is, a LYNX. It's a bit like putting gold leaf on a turd. I know that. Before you start, I know, but we're going to give it to it anyway. Before we forget. I don't really know how much it needs. We do have a dipstick here though. It's not the only dipstick in the ring, but it is a dipstick. Cool. Oh! It's got no markings on this. I'm assuming it wants oil up to that point, because these gearboxes, they're splash. Well, there's a long way to splash from the bottom to the top, I've got to say. Anyway, it survived this long. That's getting easier the more times you pull it out. More. Needs more, Simon. Give it a little treat, eh? Probably not had anything expensive put in it for a while. What about the engine oil? Is this 4-stroke or 2-stroke? I don't know. Perhaps I should have a look and just check the engine oil if it needs it. I don't know if it's 4-stroke or 2-stroke, to be honest. I've no clue. We should imagine it's a 2-stroke. Oh, it's Rotax, yeah, it's a 2-stroke. Now somebody's going to tell me Rotax make 4-stroke engines. Okay, alright, so Rotax make 4-stroke engines. But what I know about Rotax is a 2-stroke. Anyway, right. Gearbox complete, steering linkage complete, not steering, stop saying that. Forward and reverse linkage is complete. Right, I think all we've got left to do now is work on that broken radiator housing. So I know the tension's not right, but I just want to make sure it's running true. Okay, I'm calling that done. So when I'm making sure the track is running true, what I'm looking for is the same amount of distance from the back wheel to the edge of the track on this side as I am on the other side. Right, I'm finished with that now. I can get that down, so it's shut off automatically. Yep, and we're done. I bet some of you are wondering, where's that block and tackle come from, Simon? It's always been there. And now it's not there. It says 11 hours. That's the track, the repairs to the chassis and the repairs to the radiator. I didn't show you how I repaired that. I basically drilled another hole through the aluminium and put a much bigger washer on the bolt and then squeezed it all together, and it's back as it should be. So I believe that's booked 8 hours to change that track, but we had the other little bits to do it anyway. So there it is, ready to go back to the customer. Very much appreciate you all watching. Thank you very much. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.